Okay, so my sermon for today is called God's Kintsugi, right? And so it's how the Father fills the cracks the world creates. And today I want to talk about Kintsugi. It's the Japanese art of repairing a broken pottery with gold. They don't hide the cracks, they don't disguise the damage, they don't pretend the vessel was never dropped. They fill the fractures with gold, and the vessel becomes more valuable because of what it survived. And I came to tell somebody today that God is the master of Kintsugi. He fills the cracks the world creates. He heals fathers and children. He restores what pride broke. He mends what silence shattered. And he redeems what pain tried to bury. All cracks are not created by fathers or mothers. Some cracks come from life, some from trauma, from the system, from circumstances nobody chose. Some from childhood storms, some from our own decisions. But no matter what the source, God knows how to fill them. Malachi says God will turn the hearts of fathers to their children and children to their fathers. Not turn their fists, tempers, or control or dominance, turn their hearts. This is not a verse about perfection. It's a verse about reconciliation. It's a verse about humility. It's a verse about hearts softening after years of hardness. And the verse that acknowledges something we don't always say out loud. Brokenness can run in both directions. Fathers can be wounded, children can be wounded, and God wants to heal both of them. Some fathers or parents were present but wounded. Some fathers were loving but inconsistent. Some fathers were providers but emotionally unavailable. Some fathers were trying but overwhelmed, and some fathers were broken by their own fathers. But some of the cracks that are created in us come from poverty, racism, addiction, mental health, struggles that nobody likes to talk about, grief, abandonment, and the world being unkind. And because of that, some children grew up guarded, self-reliant, afraid to need anyone, afraid to trust, afraid to be corrected, afraid to be vulnerable. These are the cracks that the world creates. But these cracks are not the end of the story. The cracks are places where God pours his gold. Insert. The reason I'm talking about cracks on Father's Day is because I made a great, I had a good time with my father until I was 14. He was the best father in the whole wide world. When I turned 14, my father decided to start doing heavy drugs, and that fractured our relationship, and we became mortal enemies. People who knew my father thought he was the best guy you ever want to meet because he always showed his best side. But if you were his family, you really knew what he was like. I loved my father. I hated my father. It was dual. When I was young, I was a big kid. I was almost 11 pounds. And when I was born, it turns out, this is in the 60s, I'm dating myself. When I was born, I had a dislocated hip. But my father didn't like messes, so when he put on my diaper, he pinned it so tight, he set my dislocated hip. But he was the one who changed my diapers. He was the one who fed me. He took care of me. He was abusive to my mother, and he would not let my mother come near me because he thought she was too stupid to take care of a child. So up until the time I was 7 years old, my father was my primary caregiver along with my grandmother. But my father, with his abusiveness and his good fatherness, he was a good father, like I said, up until 14. One of the things he gave me that a lot of people find weird is that my mother was the kindest person you ever want to meet. My grandmother, but she kept spouting good things to me. And my father was kind of, people didn't want to mess with him. But of the three of them, the one who put the love of God in me, the one who made sure that I revered him, loved him, and followed his rules as a child was my father. Not my nice mother, not my holy grandmother, but my outlaw dad. I can't forget that, because the gift of knowing who God is and loving God is the greatest gift I've ever had in my life. Without it, I wouldn't be standing here right now. I'd be 6 feet under, because God has gotten me through so many storms. When I was in the Susanna Wesley room and we were talking, I realized I was very upset because I thought I lost my father at 14. But at 42, I realized that I still had a father who was watching out for me and making sure I went down the right path, and that was God, our Father. He filled in where my father fell down. Even though my father was broken, God did not drop me. And even though my father was broken, God didn't drop him either. My father did the best he could with what he had. He was born in 1941, 2 weeks after they bombed Pearl Harbor, actually. And his life was hard growing up, and a lot of that hardness and racism, prejudice, all that he grew up with. And he left school when he was in 8th grade, so he didn't have much of an education. I realized as a father and a husband, he did the best he knew how with what he was given. He wasn't an evil man. He was a broken one. When I was younger, I thought he was evil. When he was younger, I told him the reason he was still alive was because hell was afraid he'd take over. Yes, I told him to his face. I was a little wild child. But as I got older, when I turned 42, I realized that my father was not evil. He was just broken. He was never supposed to be on a pedestal, and he did the best he could. But even with his faults, I still turned out to be a good kid. I still treat people the way I want to be treated. I still look for that person who's sitting in the corner that everybody ignores. Because even with his brokenness, I still got fixed because God filled in where my father fell down. Sometimes, talking to people in the church, I found out that a lot of people have the same issue I have. You would be amazed at how many people have daddy issues. Their fathers weren't there for them. Their fathers didn't support them. You know, their fathers acted like they loved them, but never showed them. And I don't think it's the fault of the men we call fathers. I think it's a fault of the society that raised them not to be able to have feelings, not to show it. So we can't fault them for what they did not have. And when we accept God in our lives, when we let Jesus in our hearts, when we let him guide us, and we turn around and look at our lives, we realize that the person that we are now, regardless of who that person who raised us was, whether they were the greatest person in the world or the worst, they formed who we are today. Jesus takes that pain and it turns it into compassion when we allow him to fix us. I allowed Jesus to fix me. I could have been bitter and mean and cruel and sent out just as much hate and hurt that was given to me through my life. But I decided I did not like it, and I would not do that to anybody else. Those choices are ours. But the foundation of that choice that I made was made because of my father and my grandmother putting the love of God in my heart and in my mind at a young age, and I accepted it, and I lived it regardless of what happened to me. A lot of us, we go to church and we sit in a pew and we think an hour will do fine. Jesus wasn't about sitting in a church. He did not say, oh, if you go to church every week, you will be saved and join me in heaven. He said, follow him. Follow him. I try my best to follow him, and I hope each and every one of you do too. Because following him means you have peace when there's chaos around you. You have love in your heart when everybody else's heart has turned to stone. You can forgive people who have done atrocious things to you, but just because you forgive them does not mean you allow them back in your lives. I think about that all the time. When Jesus was on the cross, he forgave all the people who crucified him. But when he was resurrected, he did not hang out with those people. He went back to his friends. Why can't we do the same thing? We can forgive people and not carry that hatred, that bitterness, and move on to be around people who are going to show us the love and kindness and compassion that we need so we can keep our hearts soft in a world that's full of stony hearts. If you look on the news and look around you, all you see is pain and hatred. And it boggles my mind that in such a beautiful, beautiful world, people keep creating more ways to hurt people instead of loving them and helping them. And Christ called us to be the kind of people who put love and compassion in the world. Yet there are Christians calling themselves Christians who are putting hate in the world. I just can't fathom, if you're following Christ, how can you be mean to anything or anybody? How can you destroy plants and just to make money? He was not about money. Neither was Paul. Anyway, back to being dads. For 42 years, actually 55, I was a very broken person. 42 was when I decided not to be broken anymore and started getting healed. I was a very broken person. I went through a lot. I know there are people who went through more than me. But you know what I found out? Regardless of how much pain someone sends my way, I reciprocate with love, kindness, and understanding. And eventually, the people who were sending me all the hatred start sending me love, because you can't force a person to be nice, but you can show them the niceness. And maybe eventually that seed will get planted for niceness. Like I said, I think about my dad all the time. The older I get, the more I wish things would have been different between us. But he had his demons, and he was too prideful to let God in to change him. But I was not. Pride is the biggest problem that a lot of people have, not just men. They don't want to lose control. They don't want to lose dominance. They need to be in charge. But Jesus didn't teach us that. He taught us to serve. He taught us to protect. Jesus didn't get on the cross, get a sword, and start chopping people up. He died to protect us. And if we call ourselves Christians, we have to serve too. Strength is in serving, not in dominating. Strength is in letting people become who God wanted them to be, trying to get them through life without causing any more cracks than we have to. And the only way we can do that is when we follow Jesus. Sorry. I can't help it, I cry a lot. He made me like that. When I was younger, my parents told me, don't wear my heart on my sleeve, because I cried about every little thing, every little hurt that I saw someone have. I have a lot of empathy. I learned to control it, not have empathy, and I cut myself off, built a wall around my heart. And these last 7, 8 years, I've learned to tear the wall down, and now I'm just a well of tears. Okay. Now, I want to talk about a couple of other dads other than mine, right? It's funny, you know, with our history books, when we talk about our presidents or famous people, we put them in the best light possible unless the person who wrote the history book didn't like them. In the Bible, they don't do that. When you see fathers and children in the Bible, there are a lot of broken dads and a lot of broken children. Like David and Tamar. I don't know if you know the story. David had way too many concubines, and he had a son called Anan, and he had a daughter named Tamar. And Anan liked Tamar, so he raped her. Absalom was Tamar's brother. He was very upset about it, went to David, asked him for justice, and David Anan apologized. Absalom didn't like that, and he wound up killing Anan and eventually taking over the kingdom until he was finally killed. Because David kind of loved his children, he didn't want to punish any of them. He showed them no direction. He wound up having a daughter who was mentally ill and 2 dead sons. Right? And then there's Jacob and his children. And everybody knows the story about Joseph. And the reason Joseph got thrown in that pit and finally sold to Egypt as a slave was because Jacob was showing favoritism to certain children and not doing it to others, which created the envy and the anger and the point where they sold their brother into slavery. Because favoritism doesn't work either. It causes enmity between the children. Sorry. So, like I said, the Bible is full of fathers who were broken, who didn't do what they should have done to take care of their children, yet their children still became great people. David was left in the fields when Samuel came to anoint the next king because Jesse didn't like him. You know, he just thought he was a nothing, a nobody, and he turned out to be one of the best kings in Israel's history. As people, we have a bad tendency to judge. And sometimes we judge wrong. And we have another tendency not to be very empathetic to the people that we hurt. We forget they're people because they're our children, so they don't really have any say, or they're our parents and they're dumb or stupid or they just don't understand. But we're all people, parents, children, friends, acquaintances, enemies. And we have to remember that we're all God's children, and we should treat each person as a child of God and give them the benefit of the doubt. We don't have to like them all, but we do have to love them all. Okay. Okay. See, I'm skipping over a lot of this stuff because I don't need it. And my nose is cold. I've been crying too much. Oh, here we go. Wait, hold on. Oh, good. Yes. Okay. So, to wind up, we should bring the wounds, bring our pride, bring our silence, and bring our story, and let God do his kintsugi to fill in the cracks with gold and make us whole, and make us beautiful, and make us strong. Right? I am not whole because life was gentle. I am whole because God filled the cracks. My father was broken, but God used him. I was broken, but God restored me. And the gold in my story is the glory of God. Thank